It's been a few years since Apple launched the M1, the first generation of its own processors, which it included in all its Macs, including the Mac Mini, surprising everyone with its power and performance, being a chip designed under the ARM architecture. In this video, I'll tell you based on my personal experience if the Mac Mini M1 is still worth in 2024. Stick around, I'll tell you all about it. With the imminent launch of Apple's M4 series of processors later this year, it doesn't seem like a very good idea to buy a Mac with an M1 chip. In fact, September and October are the worst time to buy a Mac, since it's around this time that the new generations of Macs are announced along with their processors. However, there's a number of reasons why if you don't have the budget to buy a Mac fresh out of the oven, I recommend going for a Mac with one of the M1 family chips. Personally, I consider myself a regular Pro user. What do I mean? Well, surely you have seen a videos in which the dichotomy of whether you are a Pro user or a regular user prevails. The difference being the power you need in a computer to be able to use certain apps or certain workflows. However, I think this difference in users is somewhat blurred, since there are times when, as a regular user who uses some professional apps, there are times when I require a lot of power, although in most cases it is not so necessary in my workflow, depending on which one it is. In my case, I have a Mac Mini M1 with 256GB of internal storage and 8GB of RAM, plus a 212GB external hard drive, and it's still pretty powerful, although to be honest, it feels quite short for some tasks. Let's look at some cases. For graphic design, I most frequently use Illustrator and Photoshop, which most of the time I've used them has been fairly smooth, although there comes with a point where Photoshop freezes without shutting down. It usually responds a few seconds later, but it is very annoying if that happens repeatedly when working with large files. Seriflabs apps, by the other hand, such as Affinity Designer 2 and Affinity Photo 2, are more comfortable to work with, as for some reason they are smoother on macOS. For some video editing and some simple effects, I usually use Adobe Premiere Pro and After Effects, although sometimes I also use Apple's Final Cut Pro and Motion, like in this case with this video. This is important to mention as although Premiere Pro and After Effects initially run smoothly, with updates to these apps and, let's be honest, macOS updates, they have become too heavy to use on this Mac when working with 4K footage. If you're working with Full HD footage, you should have no problem working with the Adobe apps. As for Apple's apps, while it is possible to work with 4K content almost seamlessly, you have to turn off background processing in Final Cut Pro to avoid crashes, although this does mean it will take longer to preview. But it's worth, believe me, it's worth it if you want to speed up your workflow a little bit more. As for Motion, it did crash a few times, but I should point out that it was fixed after an update like a year ago. As for music production, I use 3 digital audio workstations, the main one being Logic Pro X, followed by Ableton Live 12 and FL Studio. In this case, the one I don't like so much how it works and how it does audio processing is FL Studio, as the audio sounds like a cheap horn when it doesn't have much RAM available for some reason. In the case of Logic Pro X and Ableton, these two have worked pretty well for me, although, Logic Pro itself has crashed a couple of times, but that's because of third-party VSTs and with a beta version of macOS Boy, since it searches for new VSTs every time you open the program. I mean, as an amateur music producer, not using many tracks and uses, I haven't seen any crashes because of this. For 3D work, there's a lot of things to talk about here. You have to remember that this processor, the M1, doesn't have hardware accelerated ray tracing, and the RAM memory is too well limited to be able to work with these heavy projects with lots of lights and polygons, and even textures. On this Mac, I have tried to work with Blender, Cinema 4D, Unreal Engine 5, and Twinmotion, and all with different results. Let's go by one, shall we? In the case of Blender, the free 3D creation software favorite of most 3D professionals, on this Mac it has mixed results. I have been able to work with somewhat large scenes which are available on the Blender's website. However, the computer becomes very slow when working with lights and transparencies, especially with textures such as glass, as well as more complex textures such as fabrics, working with the Cycles render engine. Now, moving on to Cinema 4D, interestingly, it performs decently on this computer. I have been able to work with particle systems and substance textures using the Redshift rendering engine with some fluidity, although it is necessary to comment that I work with cache in order to make it work more fluid. As for Unreal Engine 5, the results are bad, miserably I'd say. But curiously, this done with the upgrade to macOS Ventura, since this Mac came with macOS Monterey from factory. And with this operating system, it worked very well, allowing me to work with large maps and several polygons, especially using the nanites technology for the simplification of the polygons of the objects in the scene. For some reason, when upgrading to Ventura and then Sequoia, it became almost impossible to work with this engine. Finally, when working with Twinmotion, the results are similar to those of Unreal Engine 5, since although it has allowed me to work with ready-made scenes, when rendering images or videos, it hangs, it freezes, taking more than 10 minutes to unfreeze, close and reopen the project. One thing I have to point out is that I moved all of the cache folders of all the apps and the sound libraries of the DAWs to the external disk that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Although, it is also important to mention that being a mechanical disk in HDD and being connected to the computer via USB Type-A, the read and write speeds are slower than if it were a solid-state disk or SSD and it had it connected via USB-C, which is in this computer is also compatible with a Thunderbolt. This has allowed me not to take up so much space in the Mac's internal storage and to work with so many apps on a computer with so little storage. In conclusion, is the Mac Mini M1 worth it in 2024? Yes, if your workflow is similar to mine and you don't do as much or any 3D or game design work. If this were to be your case, in other words, you work in 3D and game design, and are not that interested in how to accelerate ray tracing, I will recommend you to go for a MacBook Pro with an M1 Pro or M1 Max chip, as they are still very capable machines for this kind of workflows. Thanks for sticking around to the end. If you like my content, please give me a like, subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends. That will help me, believe me, a lot. See you in the next video, GAMAGAs.